As a 27-year-old male, I never thought that something like this would happen to me. Fate had different plans for me and my fiancée, a 26-year-old feminine individual whom I affectionately call L. My parents, a 52-year-old male whom I refer to as B, and a 50-year-old feminine individual whom I call R, have also been caught up in this unexpected turn of events. Despite never having used Reddit before, I have seen stories from this platform on TikTok, and I thought it might be worth a shot to seek advice from this community. I have heard that many people like to know the backstory, so I will try to provide as much clarity and precision as possible. Please bear in mind that it has only been a week since this happened, and I may lose my composure while recounting the events that have taken place. Elle and I crossed paths during her freshman year of college when we both resided in the same dormitory building. As fate would have it, we later discovered that we lived only 2 towns apart from each other. Consequently, whenever we traveled home, I offered to drive her, adding only an extra 20 minutes to my commute. As we continued to hang out and take trips together, our friendship transformed into a romantic relationship. Given that both Elle and I came from close-knit families, we wasted no time in informing our respective families about our newfound love. While I had met her family several times when dropping her off, our interactions had been limited to brief introductions and exchanging pleasantries. Both our families welcomed each other with open arms, and our relationship blossomed into something beautiful. As I was a year ahead of her, I graduated first and returned home, where I was fortunate enough to receive a lucrative job offer. Despite the distance, I made every effort to visit her in school, and whenever she returned home, we made it a priority to spend time with each other. After Elle graduated, she moved in with me, as both of our jobs were located in the city near our hometown. Like me, she was also offered a position at the company where she currently works, with a generous salary. After cohabiting for about 3 years, I proposed to her, and we have been planning our wedding ever since. Now, on to the part that you have all been waiting for. As I reflect on the past, I realize that I had overlooked several things that I had simply written off as my father's attempt to welcome my ex into our family. I recall instances where my father would call her frequently, and if I happened to be in the vicinity, they would brush it off as a discussion about an upcoming family gathering or something of that nature. I vividly recall a particular incident where Elle was taking a shower, and her phone began to ring. Upon glancing at the caller ID, I noticed that it was my father calling. Without any hesitation, I answered the phone, and upon realizing it was me on the other end, my father sounded both surprised and agitated. I inquired about the reason for his call, and he mentioned that he wanted to speak with Elle regarding my mother's upcoming birthday celebration, which was only a week away. As I type this, I am overwhelmed with a sense of stupidity due to the fact that I did not see the situation as it really was. The day I discovered the truth was just like any other typical day. Elle had Thursdays off, and as usual, she prepared breakfast for the both of us. Before leaving for work, she gave me a tender kiss and wished me a great day. As I made my way to work, I suddenly realized that I had forgotten some critical paperwork that I would need for an important meeting scheduled for 3 p.m. Initially, I didn't think much of the situation and convinced myself that it would be a simple matter to retrieve the forgotten paperwork during my lunch break. Throughout the day, Elle and I exchanged text messages, discussing the usual trivialities that couples often talk about, such as dinner plans and laundry. As I had not thought it necessary to inform her that I would be coming home for lunch, I left work without any advance notice and headed straight home. Upon arriving home, I couldn't help but notice a car parked in our lot that bore a striking resemblance to my father's vehicle. Despite the nagging thought at the back of my mind, I brushed it off and proceeded to park my car and make my way into our building. I was in for the shock of my life when I opened the door to our apartment. The scene that greeted me was something out of a cliched movie, where a man returns home early only to catch his significant other in a compromising position with another person. To my horror, There was a trail of clothes scattered throughout the entire apartment, leading all the way to our bedroom where the sound of faint moans echoed through the air. I stood there at the doorway, completely dumbfounded, as a mix of emotions, ranging from rage to sadness to disgust, flooded my mind. Despite the turmoil within, I remained motionless, appearing like a statue if anyone had been present to witness the scene. When I finally regained consciousness, I realized that I had no idea how much time had passed. I reached for my phone, feeling slightly disoriented, and started to record. As I looked around the messy room, I noticed that there were clothes scattered all over the floor. Feeling a sudden burst of anger, I picked up all the clothes and threw them out into the hall of the building. After that, I decided to capture the moment on video. As I walked towards my bedroom, I noticed that the door was open. Without hesitation, I stood in the doorway and began to film for about a minute. Suddenly, I flipped on the lights, causing both of them to jump in surprise. To my utter shock, it was my father, in bed with her. After the initial stun, my father noticed that I was recording and started to panic. He scrambled to find anything to cover himself, all the while begging me to stop recording. He quickly found a towel and hastily wrapped it around his waist. As he started to walk towards me, I could feel my anger boiling inside me. I warned him, "If you don't want to get hurt, you better stop coming towards me." However, he either didn't care or didn't hear me, and continued to approach me. In a fit of rage, I hit him square on the jaw. His head bounced off the door, and he slumped to the ground. Elle let out a piercing shriek, and I aimed the camera at her. With a mix of disgust and disbelief, I said, "You're concerned about your buddy, but you have nothing to say to your fiancé?" My father eventually woke up after taking a brief nap, and I quickly told them that I needed to come pick something up for work. I made it clear that if either of them were still there when I returned, I would send this video to everyone they knew. After I finished recording, I ended the video and turned towards my father, who was still coming to. With a cold, hard stare, I said, "You're dead to me. You're no longer my father." It was the only thing I could think to say in that moment. Before I could turn on my heels and leave, I remembered one final thing that needed to be said. "You might want to go home and talk to Mom," I said icily, "because I'll be talking to her very soon." With that, I walked out of the room, leaving my father and his mistress to deal with the aftermath of their actions. After the shocking confrontation with my father and his mistress, I sat in my car for what felt like hours. Lost in thought and still reeling from the events that had just taken place, I couldn't seem to gather my thoughts. Suddenly my phone rang, and I saw that it was one of my bosses from work. I answered and explained that I was on my way back to the office with the necessary paperwork. When I arrived at her office, I must have looked terrible, because my boss immediately asked me what was wrong. I hesitated for a moment before telling her that it was nothing and that I would be okay. However, she wasn't convinced and began scanning me up and down, looking for any signs of distress. Suddenly, she noticed a small trickle of blood on my collar and exclaimed, "You're bleeding!" In a flurry of activity, she rushed to my side and began inspecting the wound, asking me how it happened. I couldn't bear to look my boss in the eye as she examined the small wound on my collar. When she asked me how it happened, I hesitated for a moment before admitting the truth. "It was my father," I said quietly, avoiding her gaze. My boss looked confused, so I pulled out my phone and showed her the video I had taken. She watched it in its entirety, her expression growing more and more horrified with each passing second. My boss knew Elle, but she had never seen my father. It wasn't until the end of the video, when my father was revealed to be the other person in the room, that my boss finally understood the gravity of the situation. She sat there in stunned silence for a moment, trying to process what she had just seen. Finally, it clicked. My fiancée, the woman I loved and trusted, had been cheating on me. And not only that, but she had been cheating with my own father. My boss could see the pain etched on my face and asked if there was anything she could do to help. She suggested that I take some time off to process everything that had happened, but I knew that I couldn't just abandon my responsibilities at work. I told her that I would be okay for the meeting, but that I needed a minute to compose myself. Thankfully, I had another shirt in my office, so I was able to change and put on a brave face for the rest of the day. The meeting itself went over fine, but it was a struggle to keep up the facade of normalcy. I forced a smile and tried to act like nothing had happened, even though my world had been shattered only hours before. After the meeting, my boss came up to me and asked how I could carry on like that, but I didn't have an answer for her. I simply said that I didn't know and retreated to my office. As soon as I got home, I was alone for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The silence was deafening, and I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by everything that had happened. I paced the room trying to make sense of my emotions, but nothing seemed to make sense. The person I had loved and trusted most in the world had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way possible. And to make matters worse, it was my own father who had been involved in the affair. As the reality of the situation began to sink in, I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. I collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down my face as I tried to come to terms with what had happened. For the first time in a long time, I was truly alone with my thoughts. And it was a painful, gut-wrenching experience. I would like to express my gratitude for taking the time to read my thoughts. I apologize for the length of my prose, but I found it quite cathartic to put everything down in writing. I'm faced with a dilemma that I cannot seem to resolve. It has become clear to me that I must vacate this apartment immediately, for I cannot continue to reside here any longer. Furthermore, I am resolute in my decision not to sleep in that bed under any circumstances. In addition to these pressing matters, I'm aware that I must undergo testing for sexually transmitted diseases. Moreover, I am quite certain that I have sustained an injury to my hand, and it requires medical attention.